Hello, good evening. It's Adil Fazal here, market analyst for CFDs.com. Be sure to visit www.cfds.com for your trading needs. We are the specialist in CFD brokerage. Alternatively, you can visit www.cfds.education to certainly learn more too. Okay, this is a video or market wrap up of basically insight into US markets and where we're headed. Okay, in terms of the actual US markets at present, what's the overriding fundamental factors at play? Basically, we have terrorism concerns, number one. Okay, we have concerns with regards to the Fed obviously hiking rates, and that certainly remains a concern as well. So them two will be the overriding or key themes this week, and let's see exactly how this market is obviously responding. Now, we start off with the Nasdaq, and that's why I like to observe, because it is a leader. Now, the Nasdaq itself has put a bullish engulfing candle, so it's negated last week's or previous week's sell candle. Okay, now it certainly has totally ignored and negated the concerns over Paris and the terrorism concerns. It's negated and ignored the Volkswagen concerns. It's totally negated and ignored China concerns. Now, before I even look at the actual US markets, let's bring up the Asian markets first of all. Let's see exactly how they are placed to move. Okay, so let's just bring them up and let's have a look at the Nikkei first of all. Now, the Nikkei is actually into gap fill resistance. Okay, now the given Nikkei is into gap fill resistance, which means that it's generally a signal that US markets are now going to reverse course as well. Okay, that's generally what the understanding is with regards to the actual Nikkei itself generally moving in tandem with US markets. Also with regards to the Shanghai, ever since we've put in that topping tail, the market certainly has been weak. We obviously have failed to negate or surpass the Fib 75% resistance. And it certainly seems that all the bullish news certainly has been baked into the cake, given the fact that we've had this immense and immaculate thrust higher. Okay. Now, not only do we look at the actual, obviously, Nikkei and the Shanghai that are obviously indicating weakness, we also bring up the chart of the USD JPY, because it's all about, number one, it's all about the Kool-Aid. So we're looking at JPY and Euro, okay? So given the fact that the dollar itself or the USD JPY is putting a potential double top, that's thereby signaling that you are going to see weakness in US markets too, because you are looking to break out this bullish channel. And certainly indicating weakness. And looking at a weekly chart, you have this H&S formation on the USD JPY. Looking up at a 4-hour chart, again, you're looking for a double top, but confirmation is already there, and you're looking for a lower high. Looking at a 60-minute chart of the USD JPY, again, you're just consolidating here at present, and therefore looking for a potential risk-off scenario. So if the USD JPY has failed to move higher because the USD JPY and the S&P 500 move in tandem and it's putting a double top, then you are looking at potential risk-off scenario going forward. This is just an insight based on intermarket analysis. Okay, so going back to the Nasdaq itself, given the fact that we've rallied higher, given the fact that we still have terrorism concerns, etc., etc., this is going to be very interesting and going forward, and how we interpret the actual market itself, it's going to be very, very interesting. Okay, now going to a daily chart of the Nasdaq itself, you are around the Fib 75% resistance, although we have exceeded that, so we have to respect that to a large extent. And again, you are looking at further weakness on the Nasdaq, given the fact that you've got this horizontal resistance, obviously that's held previously, and you are looking at a key pivot zone there for a reversal lower. And also you have an unfilled gap on the Nasdaq on the daily chart. Bringing up a 60-minute chart on the Nasdaq itself, yes, you do have an unfilled gap that needs to close at 4708. Given the fact that you have terrorism concerns, okay, and you have concerns in China, etc., and given the fact that Asian indices are into resistance, USD JPY is into resistance, that doesn't exactly bode well. Okay, and remember, you do have an unfilled gap below. Going to your 10-minute chart of the Nasdaq itself, you can see that you have put in a potential triple top, quadruple top Nasdaq at resistance of 4690, and therefore you are looking for a lower price down to 4655 to close a gap. So then, and also you do have an unfilled gap below as well, which is at 4565, which is 100 points lower than that previous gap. So again, interesting scenario. Okay, interesting scenario. Now, if we cross-reference the actual Nasdaq itself with the semiconductors, or should we say the biotechs, you can see that the biotechs are putting double top resistance, and that gap fill resistance has held ever since. So you are back into resistance on the biotechs, and it's confirming the weakness as well. Looking at the semiconductors, you're now into gap fill resistance, and therefore you are looking at resistance on the semiconductors, given the fact that we've put in lower lows and lower highs, and now you are looking at putting in a lower low. And once again, remember, you do have resistance. So everything is certainly aligning up for a potential move lower. That's the interesting scenario at present. Everything is aligning for a potential move lower on the US markets. Now, bringing up a chart of Apple as well, you'll see that it's actually into gap fill resistance. So again, interesting scenario. Now, let's bring up the chart of the S&P 500. Going to a weekly chart first of all, and you can see that it's still an inside bar, so it's still languishing, still showing weakness. And this is cross-verified with the Russell itself. If I bring up a chart of Russell, you can see on the weekly chart you still have an inside bar, so it's still bearish consolidation, so therefore indicating weakness. Daily chart itself, you're into gap fill resistance, and obviously you've got that topping tail, and therefore looking for the right shoulder to close a gap below. Now you have this rising contracting wedge. You're in previous support equals resistance on the Russell 2000, and therefore this is indicating weakness on the S&P 500. So if I go to my S&P 500 chart now, on the daily chart, you can see that we've held that fib 75%, putting a topping tail. Going to your 60-minute chart, you can see that we've broken out the rising contracting wedge pattern, and therefore looking for potential weakness or further lower. Looking at your 10-minute chart, you have an unfilled gap. You're into lower lows and lower highs, and therefore you're looking for that gap to close at 2081, potentially lower. So everything is indicating weakness on the S&P and the Russell itself. The last indices that we can check, we can also check the Wiltshire as well. This is always a good index to observe, and you can see that the 5,000 stocks basically are into fib 75% resistance on the daily after breaking out that key wedge. Okay, 60-minute chart itself certainly has resistance if we do decide to push higher up here, and up here. Okay, regardless. And also, if we bring up the other indices, let's just bring up the actual Dow itself. The Dow Jones, let's just bring up the weekly chart. The Dow itself, still it's an inside bar, so it's not exactly bullish. Daily chart, again, you have surpassed the fib 75% resistance, but you do have the resistance at double top here. Okay, so again, double top resistance on the Dow Industrials 30. Okay. Now, if we cross-verify that with the Dow Transports, you can see you've already put in a topping tail, you're into horizontal resistance, and therefore you are looking at further weakness and a potential move lower. So these are all things that you're going to observe in terms of the markets themselves, and you are looking at potential weakness. So if the Dow is into resistance, where do you think the FTSE will go? Obviously, it will go lower. Yes? Okay, so that's basically something that we just have to observe going forward. So again, it's going to be very interesting as to which way this market wants to go next. For my bias, based on obviously given the fact that we're traders, I am looking for potential thrust and a move lower on the actual market itself. So again, that's going to be interesting, and in terms of the next movement on this market and how this market reacts. So you're looking at this rising wedge pattern here, potentially breaking to the downside given the horizontal resistance has been held. So again, another index indicating weakness. Okay, now let's have a look at the actual individual sectors themselves. Now the actual financial sector is very key and very important. You can see that we have pushed higher. We've put in a doji and now indicating weakness there as well. So again, financials are certainly weak. Okay, the 60-minute chart, again, you are looking at horizontal resistance being held. You have resistance here and resistance here. So again, these are two resistance zones, and therefore you are looking at further weakness as well on the financials. That's basically what I would be looking for, and obviously a breakdown. Now looking at the energy sector, again, that's always key. You can see still it's weak given the fact that oil prices have dropped, and you are seeing immense weakness in oil regardless. There is further bearish news on the price of oil, and you can see here the next level of resistance or support, it looks like it's going to be 39 region, potentially lower. Okay, given the fact that we've had several reports, you can see every single time we've started to rally, it's certainly failed miserably. And given the fact that copper has already put in new lows, the oil is certainly looked to follow. I did expect the dollar weakness to send the commodities higher, and that's obviously failed to materialize. So that's not exactly a good sign for the FTSE 100. Okay, going into Monday's open itself. Okay, now looking at the retail sector itself, you are into gap fill resistance. So again, that's certainly a weakness. Looking at the home builders at the moment, you are back into that 200 MA resistance. So again, and horizontal resistance slightly above. The consumer staples, bearish engulfing candle on the Friday, so that's not exactly a good sign. And the utilities, obviously, once it's closed that gap, and you can clearly see there's resistance ever since you've closed that gap. So everything is pointing lower from my perspective on the S&P 500. So again, it's going to be very interesting. Again, like I said, terrorism concerns will dominate. Obviously, talk about potential hike itself will certainly bear the brunt. And that certainly is a wrap, folks. Okay, be sure to visit cfds.com for your trading needs. Goodbye.